Looking to get professional, radio-ready mixes faster? Well, by the end of this video, you'll know my top 15 tips for faster mixes. But before we get started, we're giving away our mix workflow cheat sheet for free for this video. It's a great way to learn how to mix step by step. And honestly, all the tips we're going to talk about are really just workflow. So that cheat sheet goes into a lot more detail on some stuff that could really help you out on getting your mix from A to Z and out there into the world. Hey everyone, Dylan here with Musician on a Mission, here today with another tip video for you. So this one is going to be on faster mixes. Now, obviously, mixing is a game of time. The longer you mix, the more your ears become tired and your judgment becomes blurred, and you're not really going to be able to create the best mix possible if you're hours and hours and hours into it. Now, before we actually get started on the tips, I do want to dive into that idea. Why is it that people always say that the faster you mix, to a certain extent, the better your mix ends up sounding? So the main reason that faster mixing is so important is because of two things: ear fatigue and choice fatigue. Now, ear fatigue, a lot of us are probably pretty familiar with. It's the idea that the longer your ear is exposed to consistent sound, the less accurate it becomes. Your ear works like a muscle. The more you work it out, the less you're going to be able to lift. So if you are mixing nonstop for 8 hours, well, you're not really going to be able to hear your mix accurately anymore. And so that means that you're going to be making decisions, really important decisions, based on inaccurate information. And this is always why after a really long mixing session, the next day you wake up and you listen to your mix and you're just like, wow, this sounds like crap. That's probably why. Is because what you were hearing the night before was not what the mix was actually sounding like. Now, choice fatigue is another thing entirely, and it's something that we don't talk enough about in the mixing industry. Now, what happens with choice fatigue is that your body is using actual physical resources whenever you are making a choice. And I really mean that. You're using glucose and a combination of a bunch of other random body chemicals every time that you make a decision. So what that means is that the more decisions you make, the more tired you become, and the harder it is to actually finish a mix. You can see I'm slowing down my speech. That's on purpose. To get a point across, that was stupid. It's a bit of a vicious cycle. The more choices you have to make, the longer you're going to have to mix, which means you're going to have to make more choices, which means you're going to have to mix even longer, and so on and so forth. So one of the important things about mixing faster is keeping the amount of decisions you have to make in a mix low. And I don't necessarily mean low like 2 decisions and you're done. That's never going to happen. I mean in the thousands upon thousands of tiny little decisions that you're making while you're mixing. We are going to be going over some tips on how to get rid of some of those and speed up the process of mixing so that you'll be able to finish it faster, so that you don't get ear fatigue and less tired because you won't have choice fatigue. So let's get right into this. This video is actually going to be split into 2 parts. So part 1 is going to be what you can do before the mix, and part 2 is going to be what you can do during the mix, because a lot of faster mixing actually comes from prep. So let's get right into part 1. So all of the tips in this section honestly are really just about creating your perfect mix template. Everything is going to be focused on that. If you aren't aware, what a mix template is it's basically a setup on your DAW that you can recall every single time you start a mix or even start a song that you're writing. Because all of your organization and all of your routing and all of your favorite plugins, because all that stuff is already there, you're going to be able to get started on your mix an hour earlier just by already doing the work ahead of time. It's going to save you so much time on every single mix that you'll do from here on out. So you can see right now, I actually have my own mix template set up here. So we're going to be going step by step through how I made my template, and hopefully that'll be able to help you out with making your own template. So tip number 1 is to create instrument folders. And every single DAW calls it something different. In fact, instrument folders isn't even what Logic Pro calls it, but that's basically what it is. If I was to come in here and have a few audio files, so I'm just going to grab some random stems, it doesn't matter what they are. You can see I have them on 2 different audio tracks, but I actually have a little drop-down box that allows me to minimize the entire thing. Then I have a drop-down box inside of a drop-down box. So basically I can have all of the parts of an instrument going to their own little folder, and then I can just sum this entire folder down so that I don't have to look at it. From a visual perspective, oh my gosh, it's huge. This is maybe my favorite tip of this entire thing. So to get a little bit more detailed on it, because like I said, every DAW has a different way of doing this. The way that Audio Pro does it specifically is you have basically an audio file, and I'll create one right here just for ease. And you're going to right click and hit create track stack. And inside of Logic, there's 2 different kinds of folders. There's a folder stack and a summing stack. Now, what a summing stack is it's basically just creating an instrument bus for you. So if you're familiar with buses, it's basically where you send all of the microphones of a particular instrument to a single aux track. And we call that the instrument bus, because basically you're picking all of the microphones up and you're taking it all to one single place, just like a school bus. So what a summing stack does is it keeps you from having to do that. It just creates it for you. So you can see the output of this track is bus 39, and the input of this track is also bus 39. So if I was to play some audio, let me grab this, bring it up here. So you can see the audio actually popped up on this channel as well. And if I was to do any kind of processing, that processing would affect any audio inside of this folder. Now, the cool thing about this is that you can actually have multiple bus folders, or summing stacks, as Logic Pro calls it, inside of one folder stack, which doesn't actually have any kind of bus processing. It's just an organization thing, nothing more. So for example, let me go down to my electric guitars. I have several different electric guitar parts, and I'll actually minimize these. So every one of these is a particular summing stack for a different electric guitar part, so that I'll basically be able to mix every electric guitar part differently. But I have all of them inside of a completely separate folder, what's known as a folder stack in Logic Pro. So if I just don't want to look at the electric guitars at all, if I'm not working on them right now, all I've got to do, hit that, and all of that goes away. So I just want to show you how much this is going to clear up everything in your session. So this is obviously a lot of tracks that I have on here. Now I actually have a keystroke set up where I can minimize everything that's been selected with a single keystroke. So look at this. All of this, now it is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9 if you count this, but that was just for an example. And same thing, all I've got to do is hit whatever I've set my keystroke up to, and everything is completely unminimized. And that's going to be extremely helpful for getting rid of sort of visual distraction. One thing that happens, especially when you're really deep into a mix, is you've got 50 tracks and you're constantly trying to find the right one to work on. You're constantly being distracted, even if it's subconsciously, by all of like the colors around you and all of like the different random blocks and shapes of sound. So being able to just get rid of everything and minimize it so that you can't see it is so helpful for getting a faster mix. So the next tip number 2, is to create color coding for all of the instruments. So you can see right here that every single one of my instruments has its own unique color scheme. And I actually have it set up, I'll show you the electric guitars for ease, where all of the microphones are just a slightly different shade of the exact same color as all of the buses. So if I was to go down here to hit assign track color, you could see This one right here is this particular shade of yellow, but if I go up, it's just a slightly different shade of yellow. And that gives me some visual cues of being able to quickly tell apart, like, okay, what are my audio tracks and what are my buses? It's especially helpful whenever you go to the mixer, because you'll be able to see immediately, okay, yeah, here's my 2 audio files, here's my bus. Simple as that. The other great part about doing color coding is that for every single mix that you'll do from here on out, the drums are going to be red, the bass is going to be orange, the electric guitars are going to be yellow, and so on and so forth. So rather than having to search for the exact file that you need, you're just going to immediately go, oh, I need an electric guitar, yellow, I see it, moving on. Instantly, you know it is yellow and it's directly below the bass every time. It's so helpful. And I would definitely recommend, as you import your files, or if you're writing your song in this template, and I actually write my songs in my mix template as well, I would make sure that you change the color of the audio files to match the color of your track. It just makes everything look a lot nicer, look a lot cleaner. It's very, very helpful. So my next tip number 3 for faster mixing, is to create section markers. So you can actually see these things up here. Now, obviously, I don't have a song in this. This is just a default mix template. But right here, I have basically set up all of the markers that I would need to create my individual song sections. So if this was a song, I might listen through and say, okay, well, this is the intro. And then I might say, okay, well, the verse starts here. So here's verse 1. And what happens is that you don't have to worry about coloring anything. You don't have to worry about specifically going in and placing stuff. You already have everything you need right here. It's one choice that's been taken off your plate. So you're not only going to save time because it's already been done, but you're also going to save decision power. And because that is a limited body resource, we got to have as much as possible. So now that we've got that done, let's move on to tip number 4, which is to write out your editing and mixing process in a note. Logic is great because it actually has a little notes section, and most DAWs have some kind of note section that you can save. And what I've actually done is I have created a full system for organizing. So this is like my mix prep, for all of my edit steps, for anything I do, again, like my final mix prep stuff, all of the things that I go through during my mix. I really like to have a system. I like to have a workflow whenever I'm mixing. And it doesn't mean that I'm making the exact same decisions every single time, but it's more just that I know the next step that I'm moving on to. I understand what's happening right now, what I'm doing right now, and how it fits into the context of the entire mix. So it keeps me from having to sit there and be like, okay, well, I just compressed the drums. I guess I should EQ the bass, probably. I don't know. It keeps that fully out of the equation because all I have to do is say, okay, great. Well, what's the first thing I need to do? Great. I need to loop the loudest part of the song. I need to listen to my references, and I need to do an initial volume balance. And then I can move on, go on to my next step, and so on and so forth. And the nice thing about that too is that you can update it every single time you learn something new about mixing. You might laugh at this. I change this almost every week because as I've been teaching over the last however many years I've been doing this, and it's been a long time, I learn new things, from students who just are looking at their mixing process in a different way that I really like, or picking things up from other mixing instructors on YouTube or elsewhere. You just will learn stuff throughout this entire process of learning how to mix. And so having a section where you'll be able to keep track of everything that you've learned and have it in a very organized workflow kind of way is really, really helpful. Especially because once you finish something, all you've got to do is delete it. So getting back to the DAW itself, let's talk about tip number 5, and that's creating channel strip presets. Now, I love these things. Holy cow, my mixes got so much faster after I started using these. So channel strip presets are basically just presets of specific plugins with specific settings that you can preload on a particular track. So for instance, I can go in here, and in Logic Pro, you just have to click on setting. And I've actually created a lot of custom tracks. So if I want an electric guitar, for example, all I have to do is go to my standard electric guitar channel preset, and boom, here's most of the plugins that I usually use. Like I do a lot of editing with EQ. That's usually my first plugin. And then I've got some compression, got some more EQ options. Sometimes I use a noise gate at the end. And this is just a great starting place. I'm not going to use all of these plugins every single time. And a lot of times I still will swap out, for instance, my API compressor for another compressor just because I want a completely different sound. And that's okay. But the fact that I have all of this on hand so quickly and I don't have to think like, what plugin should I put on next, saves so much time. Even if in your mind it's like, well, it's only saving 5 seconds. I could just go on and do that myself. Okay, well, how many tracks are there on here? 103 tracks. So 5 seconds times 103. I'm not going to do the math because I'm not good at math, but okay, I'm going to do the math. That's going to bother me. 515 seconds. 515 seconds is what you just saved by already having that done. And you saved tons of choice fatigue power. So it ends up adding up quite a bit. Now, one other really cool thing about channel presets is that you can actually calibrate it to the level that your audio track is probably going to be set at. I make sure to do what's known as gain staging before every single mix that I do. There are videos all over YouTube on gain staging. It's a really simple process, but it's a bit of a deep dive, so we're not going to go into it right now. But what I would want to do is say, okay, well, I want to gain stage all my audio files to be set at 0 dB VU. That's the digital sweet spot. It's where plugins tend to sound the best. Now, the cool thing about this is that I can actually calibrate my plugins to be set in such a way where it's going to react pretty much how I want it to react to 0 dB VU of level. So for example, if I know that I'm going to want to get maybe like 1 to 2 decibels of compression on this first compressor, well, rather than just putting on an audio file and doing whatever with the threshold, I can calibrate it. I can make sure that, hey, I'm going to be able to put in an electric guitar and pretty much immediately I'm going to be getting the right amount of compression. And the way you do that is you use what's known, I'll get it right here, as a test oscillator. And I'm actually going to mute this because if I don't, it's going to be very loud. Every DAW has this in some way or another. And all a test oscillator is it puts out some kind of sine wave or white noise or pink noise frequencies that allows you to set the levels that you want to set. And if this track wasn't muted, you could actually, well, you would hear it. It would be piercing. It'd be very annoying. And you could see the level that was going through. So in order to get this right, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to my plugins. I'm going to grab a VU meter and I'm going to turn down the level until it's sitting at 0 dB VU. And that's exactly what I thought it would be. It's negative 18 dBFS. And again, if all of this is confusing, it's worth going and doing a little bit of research on this stuff. It's really fascinating, but we don't have time in this video to do too deep of a dive on it. But the cool thing about this is that now if I turn this on, I can actually set my threshold at the exact amount that I need. So right here, to where once I put in an electric guitar, I'm going to be getting on average about 2 decibels of compression. Now, I literally have done this on every single one of these plugins. I've made sure not only that the input or thresholds are set correctly, but also that the output is set correctly. So every single plugin is gain staged as well. So the amount of level that's going into it is the same amount that's coming out of it. So if you can do that for all of your instruments, mixing is going to be so much easier because you're not going to have to go in and fiddle with all of the knobs to get it exactly how you need it to be. You're going to be able to go and listen and say, okay, I need this to be more this, less this, whatever that particular instrument needs in the moment. So moving on with this subject of presets, let's talk about tip number 6. Create effects send presets. So you can do the exact same thing that I did on this particular channel strip with your effects sends. So I actually have a send set up right here, and I could go in here, and if I wanted a reverb, well, I have several of my favorite reverbs already set up and saved. And if I wanted a delay, I already have all of my favorite delay settings right here. So for instance, if I wanted, I don't even know what this is, electric guitar solo weird delay. Well, now I've got basically my entire plugin chain already here so that I don't have to create it if I want to recreate a particular sound, or if I just want to listen and try out some different sounds. They are all right at my fingertips. I don't have to recreate them. but I can go in and tweak them. You know, if I need this to be more like 90 instead of 425, I can go in and do that. But it's all already right here. I don't have to mess with it. And you can see I actually have all of these organized by subject. Now, again, this is different with every single DAW. I actually don't know if every DAW has this capability or if it's just Logic. But inside of your computer, there is actually a folder system that saves presets. So you can go in and basically create folders and then create subfolders. And I can actually show you what I'm talking about. You know, if I said, oh, I love how this preset sounds. I love the tweaks I made. I actually want to save this as the new version. All I would have to do is go up here, go to Save Channel Strip Setting As, and this pops up. And this basically shows you exactly what I'm talking about. I've created all of these individual folders so that I can organize all of my presets. And if I really love how this particular one is sounding, all I've got to do is go to my delay folder and then just hit save. And what will pop up is, you know, this already exists. Do you want to replace it? I obviously don't. But that's one very helpful tip as well if you are consistently coming up with better versions of the same idea. That's something that's going to save you tons of time because you're not going to have to recreate the same effect over and over and over again. You've just created it once and all you have to do is recall it. So let's keep talking about effect sends with tip number 7, create effects send aux tracks before the mix even starts. So let me show you what I have hidden in this template. Now, obviously right now, all you can see is all of these instruments, but most DAWs actually have a specific function known as hide. And you can actually see this little H up here is how you access it inside of Logic. And what this does is it allows you to hide certain tracks from view so that they're not quite as confusing to you as you are actually doing your mixing visually. So guess what? Hit H. Look at all this stuff that you couldn't see. It was sitting there, but you couldn't see it. So I actually have all of my effect sends pre-made, and I have them all organized, same as up here, by folders. So if I need to make a reverb send, boom, I already have all of my sends made up. If I need to create a delay send, boom, already have all of my sends made up. Same thing for compression. And then I've got a little section just for miscellaneous, for some saturation, some modulation, really any other kind of effect send that I could possibly need. Now, the great thing about this particular way of doing this is not only does it allow you to have easy access to volume automation or any kind of automation because, you know, your track is already created. All I have to do is go to my automation and I can very easily write whatever automation I need for a particular send. The other cool thing is that it's going to allow you to organize your bus list. And for me, that was an even bigger deal because bus lists have always really stressed me out. I don't know if you're seeing a trend here. I don't like disorganization in my DAW. It stresses me out to the max. So I've been trying to organize it as much as I physically can. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me go back to my electric guitar. So down here is how you create a new send inside of Logic. Let's look at my bus list. Usually what this is going to look like is just bus 1, bus 2, bus 3, bus 4. And really, it's just whatever bus you happen to create next is what pops up on this list. So what happens is by the end of a mix, it's just a jumbled mess. So if I need to go and find a particular bus, God, it takes like 5 minutes just to find one bus in this massive mess of lists. So what I've done is I've basically just created everything that I'm going to need and organized it. So for instance, you know, my kick is always on bus 5. My snare bus is always bus 6. And this is all of the instruments. And I've basically made it in such a way where all of my sends are on the next page. So 33 through 38, these are all of my reverbs. And then I gave myself just a little buffer for visual sake. Then 40 through 45, these are all my delays. 47 through 50 are all my compressors, and so on and so forth. And you can organize it however feels best for you. But the great thing about this is if I'm saying, okay, great, I need a reverb, boom, I have a reverb track. I know exactly where it is. It's already been labeled. All of these have been pre-made. I know that I just selected reverb 1, and I can go in here and I can select a channel strip if I want an electric guitar reverb, and great, it's done. That could have taken me probably 3 to 6 minutes to get all of the routing correct, to create the actual track, and then to bring up the specific effect that I was trying to do. And it took me 2 seconds. Now imagine how much time that's going to save you over the course of an entire mix. So that's how I've created my own template. It saves me maybe 2 or 3 hours per mix just having all this stuff already done. And all you have to do to save a template is just go to File and Save as Template. And all you need to do to start with a template is just New from Template. And you can see this little thing will pop up. If I select Main Template 01, which is what I usually use, boom. Already I have everything that I just started with, and it took 2 seconds. So now that we've talked through templates, let's go on to part 2 of this video, which is what you can do during the mix to mix faster. So let's start off with tip number 9, which is to use your computer's Windows cycle keystroke. Now, I know this isn't exactly a mixing tip, but this one's really huge for me. So when I say a window cycle function, what I mean is that in a specific program, all computers have some sort of keystroke that allows you to go between different windows of that same program. So with a Mac, for instance, that is Command tilde. So right now, if you see over here, I actually have my mix window open. And if I wanted to go and check out my arrange window, all I would have to do is hit Command tilde, and there it is. If I wanted to see my mix window, there it is. Just back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's so easy. And it keeps me from having to do this whole thing that Logic has set up, where if you hit X and like the mixer opens up down here, like this is just so visually overwhelming for me that it stresses me out. I don't like it. It slows down my workflow considerably. So I will never use the internal mixer if I can avoid it. And I'll always just have another window opened up that I can cycle through with Command tilde. And I believe in Windows, last time I checked, it was the Windows key and the Tab key. And the nice thing about this as well is you can have different windows. If you, for example, need to have the piano roll open as well, now I can cycle through all 3 of these windows extremely easily. So if I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta go to the piano roll to fix some MIDI, there it is. I don't have to open it up from the bottom and have just like a visually frustrating experience. I can have it at my hands extremely quickly. So now let's talk about tip number 10, and that is quickly gain staging your tracks with Hornets VU meter. So Hornet is actually a plugin company that I love. They make a lot of really, really creative plugins that solve some kind of niche issues. And they sell them for really cheap. Like I think this plugin is like $5 or something crazy like that. Now, basically what it does is it automatically sets the gain to a specific VU level that you're looking for. So let me go grab it. It's called the Hornet VU Meter Mark III, or I think actually Mark IV is out right now. And I could say, okay, well, I want this to be set around +2 VU. And the reason I'm saying that is because this plugin turns the volume up or down until it's peaking at that level. So if I'm wanting it to average around 0 dB VU, then it probably is safe for me to set it at about 2 dB VU. So let me show you what I'm talking about. As I'm going over here, I'm going to solo this out. I'm going to hit the auto button.
Scream, 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 oh, Blaze, I've been here for so long.
And now you can see it's sitting right around that 0 dB VU level. And the nice thing about this is you can actually put this into your channel presets, the stuff that we were talking about earlier in this video. So if this is the first plugin, you know, for example, you could go to your electric guitars and you could open up every single instance of it, hit play, let it just do its thing, and then turn all of them off. And your gain staging is done. You haven't had to go in and individually check every single track. You haven't had to go in and take the time to physically put in a gain plugin and move it up or move it down and check your meters. It's done, and it took 10 seconds. That one definitely saves me a ton of time, especially right when I'm starting my mix, so that all of my plugins that I'm using on all of my channel strips, they're all pretty much set exactly where I need them to be set. So now let's move on to tip number 11, and that's using strip silence. So what strip silence does is it basically gets rid of all of the silence in between different parts of an instrument. So you can see on this vocal right here, right here, right here, right here, all of these are just little moments of silence. And if you've been mixing for a while, you know that in between all of these moments of silence, there is air conditioning noise, and there are cars going by, and there's the singer making little lip smacks or humming their part. It's stuff that just clutters up the mix. And so, we always have to just go and manually cut it, and then go over here and cut that. And it just becomes an absolute slog trying to do that for the entire track on every single audio file. But with strip silence, we can get it done extremely quickly. So in Logic, you have to hit this little drop down button, go to Customize Toolbar, and hit Remove Silence. And if I click this button, you can see this pops up. And like I said, all DAWs have this. Just do a little Googling to figure out what yours is called. And we're just going to set our threshold so that the right amount of silence is being detected. We don't want to cut too much. And I might say, I want a little bit of release time afterwards just to make sure I'm not losing anything. And I might want a little bit of pre-attack time as well to make sure I'm not losing any of the breath. Hit OK. And there you go. All of the silence has been stripped for me. Now all I have to do is go up here and do some batch fades, and I'm done. And again, that took me, 15 seconds? That probably would have taken me 15 minutes if I had to go and do it individually by hand. So that is a very, very helpful tool, especially right before you start out with the mix, whenever you're sort of doing your initial mix prep, mix editing, that kind of stuff. So my next tip is tip number 12, and that's using the marquee tool while automating or while cutting. So every single DAW has a different name for this. I'm calling it the marquee tool just because that's what they call it in Logic. But what the marquee tool is it basically allows you to select certain parts of a track and begin to mess with just that one part, or just cut that one part out. So it's actually this tool right here. You can see it's called the marquee tool. A lot of other DAWs call it the selector tool. Again, little Google search and you'll be able to figure out exactly what your version is called. So one cool thing about this tool in Logic is it's actually set default to your command key. So you can see if I try to move this around right now, it's just a regular pointer. But if I hit command and try to move it around, all of a sudden I'm highlighting stuff. And if I click on it, look, I've split this into a completely different audio file. If I was trying to do that the other way, I'd have to go and grab my cursor. I'd have to click on this. I would have to do in Logic Command T to split it. I'd have to move it over. I'd have to split it. It'd take forever. But with marquee tool, it's just here, click, and you're done. And this is even more helpful for automation. So what I've had to do in the past, whenever I was like, okay, I want this section to be a little bit louder, I've had to go in and say, okay, I need a spot here, I need a spot here, and I need a spot here and a spot here. And then cool, that gives me the ability to move this up or down. And while that wasn't the hardest thing in the world, it saves precious moments. And a lot of times I really want accuracy. Like I want to make sure that I'm getting exactly what I need to get. In comes the marquee tool. So if I hit command and I select this and I click it, look at that. All of a sudden I have perfect access to this automation. And that's something that you can do with anything. So panning, just select it, move it up and down. If I had to do it the old fashioned way, I'd have to basically click 4 times. And I'd have to move this around to make sure it was the exact amount that I wanted, and then move it up or down. Really, really big time saver. So getting that into your workflow is going to save tons of time, especially when it comes to automation. Speaking of automation, let's talk about another one of my favorite DAW tools, and that is the marquee ruler. And this one might actually be specific to Logic Pro. I honestly am unsure. If other DAWs have this, I would just Google marquee ruler, insert your DAW here alternative. But the great thing about this, you can see basically this little black bar popped up. And if I grab and drag it, you can see every single thing is getting selected. While that might seem kind of unnecessary, here's what's great about it. Let me open up all of these. Let's say I want to start to automate the volume of my mix. Let me just make some markers really quickly. So I've got the intro, the verse. You can see why I have this in my template. This takes forever. The chorus, and let's just say I have my outro. Now, obviously that doesn't match this song, but this is just an example, so it doesn't matter. So if I was going to go in and make sure that the volume was set correctly for all of these, I'd have to open up my automation, use my marquee tool, and individually grab this, move it up or down, grab this, move it up or down. And that takes forever. So what I love to do is once I'm ready to start doing my automation is I just go up here to the marquee ruler, select everything, and click. And boom, I now have automation for every single instrument for this particular thing. And I need to make sure that I have it unselected because otherwise the automation is going to affect everything. But now I can just affect this intro, which is fantastic. So let me do it again for the verse, and then for the chorus, and then for the outro. So now I can move the volume of this track up and down as fast as I need to make sure that every single instrument is fitting in as evenly as possible throughout the entire mix. So now let's check out the next tip. Tip number 14. And that's if you can't quite figure out the tone of an instrument, if you're stuck on the tone or it's just sounding bad, try using a smart EQ. Now, this is obviously a very new solution to this problem. Smart EQs have only been around for a few years now, and we are all collectively still trying to figure out what they do, how to use them best, stuff like that. But let me solo out this room, and let's say that I've been working on this room mic just for like 10 minutes, and it just still sounds really bad. I obviously haven't touched it yet, but let's listen to it. You know, I might have just put on every EQ imaginable and it just still sounds really crappy. So what I could do is use a plugin, like for instance, Gullfoss is my favorite smart EQ, and just let the AI do it for me. And I don't necessarily think that you should just do this instead of EQing. This is a bit more of a last resort kind of thing, but this could be extremely helpful to fixing a problem that your ears just aren't quite trained enough to handle. See how much more balanced that sounds already? Hit bypass. Now, obviously, this is a room mic, so it's never going to sound like an actual drum set, but you get the idea. Using smart EQs is not something that you should be afraid of, no matter what, the decades-old engineers tell you. There are honestly some really fantastic ones on the market right now. As long as you use them more as a thing to find a solution to a problem rather than as your standard EQ, then I think you're going to be able to speed up your workflow using this pretty considerably. So now let's talk about my final tip for mixing faster, and that's tip number 15, use a reference track. Now, if you've been following Musician on a Mission for a while, you know that we have just been drilling this into your head over and over again. It's because it's so important, and it's something that is so rarely used, especially by beginners and intermediates. So if you're unaware, a reference track is just a professionally mixed song that has a similar instrumentation as yours, a similar sound as yours, in the same genre as yours, that you can use as a target while you're mixing. And while it might seem odd to constantly be checking another song to make sure that you're mixing correctly, it's going to revolutionize how you mix. Because as you begin to get ear fatigue, you're going to be able to go and check that reference mix. You'll be able to hear what a good mix should sound like, what the correct amount of brightness is, what level the snare should be at. So rather than constantly fiddling with an EQ, switching back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and just thinking, I don't know if this sounds any better or any worse, you can just quickly go and check your reference track and then you'll understand. It's as easy as that. Now, I'm obviously simplifying it pretty dramatically. I would go and do a little bit of research on your own on reference tracks. We have a great video on the channel on reference tracks that I would recommend going and checking out. But it's something that's going to speed up your mixing, specifically because, especially at the very beginning of your mix and the very end of your mix, your ear is not used to the sound of the song. So having something that you can listen to that can get your ears set in the right place is going to save you tons and tons of time instead of making poor mixing decisions. So that is it. That is all 15 of my favorite tips for mixing faster. Hopefully you found that useful. Hopefully you'll be able to shave off 30, 60, 90, even 120 minutes off of your mixing process with these kinds of tips. And before you head out, make sure to grab our free mix workflow cheat sheet. Half the stuff we've been talking about this entire time has just been mix workflow stuff. So if you want even more tips on that, I would head over to the link down in the description or the link on screen right now. Download that cheat sheet. I think it's really going to help you get even a little bit more out of this speed mixing concept. This has been Dylan with Musician on a Mission, and don't forget, create regardless.